since we've been live is that Napoli and Chelsea. So I'm just timestamping this. He says Napoli and Chelsea negotiations did not take off. However, Mikel Arteta and Arsenal have a strong interest in the Nigerian striker and could begin talks. So we saw the news about Sesko yesterday. Now one of the best in the business, especially out of Italy. Damasio has stated that Arsenal could look to go in and buy Victor Osimhen this year. Dan, the Sesko deal kind of had a lot of rivals and Arsenal fans 50-50 yesterday. Good player, but not the finished article yet. If this story from Damasio ends up bearing fruit and they go down the Victor Osimhen route, how good a signing could that be for Arsenal next year?
Yeah, I think it's got huge potential. I think there's always going to be an element of risk. And I know some Arsenal fans that I've spoke to have had sort of doubts about him and whether he'd be able to do it in the Prem. But, you know, it's a position they need if the price is right. I don't know what's the transfer figures that they're talking about, do you know?
You're looking at 100 to 120 million.
Oh, okay. This is the thing. You know what I mean? For that price, I would pay a bit more and get Isak if I'm Arsenal. Now, yeah, 120 million for Osimhen. Very good player. But, yeah, like, I if I'm them, I'd get more of a sure thing, spend a bit more, try and negotiate with Newcastle. I know if they can't get Isak, then yeah, their options are limited. But I don't know what their transfer budget is going to be because they've got a few other positions. I'm hearing Zinchenko could be on his way to Bayern Munich because company wants him. So depending on what they can get for Zinchenko, they could reinvest that. But I think that's a lot of money for Osimhen. People might disagree with me, but that's an expensive player, man. If I'm them, try and get Isak because I think that could be the signing that gets them over the line and helps them win the league if they can.
On Isak, like Newcastle were quoting 200 million, but do you think if they put like a 95 million, 100 million pound bid in to begin with, that could sort of tempt Isak to try and push a move away and they could get the price down from 200 million?
Yeah. I think if you're Arsenal, you have to try. You have to try. Don't be put off initially by them talking 200 mil. Negotiate, you know what I mean? Go in, do that low. Well, they did it with us. They went in with us for Rice at about 70 million paid over 5 years or something mad. And then obviously we negotiated and got to 105 million paid over like 2 years or 2.5 years, something like that. So yeah, I think if they do that, then you know, maybe offer a player in there as well. Maybe Jesus plus 100 mil or Jesus plus 90 mil or whatever, just to get it over the line. That would be huge for them. So I think they need to, if they seriously want to win that league, Osimhen is a very good player, but I don't look at him and say like, yeah, that's definitely going to be a hit. He's definitely going to get him over the line like I would with an Isak. So that should be their first choice. Try that. And then obviously Chelsea might sneak in there for Osimhen. You might lose him, but yeah, that's a lot of money for him. I think 125 million for Osimhen.
I don't think Osimhen is better than Isak, if I'm being honest with you. If I could get either one of them for about the same price, I'm going for Isak. First of all, Isak has been in the Premier League, so it's Premier League proven. And we know how important that is when you want to compete for the league or win something or be a serious team. So you always want Premier League proven talent, which he has. Maybe the injury could be a little bit worried because Isak does get a little bit injured too much. But in terms of like profile of players, I think Isak fits them more. I think Isak is the better player. I think he can play in the transition. He can play in possession. His hold-up play is a little bit better than Osimhen. I've watched Osimhen. I don't rate him as high as everyone does. I feel like it's Serie A tax, if I'm being honest with you, because he bagged in that one season they won the league. But that's been over a season ago. I watched him in AFCON. He looked horrible in AFCON. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think he had one goal in AFCON. That's not good enough. In that final where they needed him, his hold-up play in that final was shocking. And that still stuck with me until now, because I'm looking at him and I the physicality that you need in the Premier League is very important. When I looked at the way that he played, and I'm like, bro, you just don't have it. Like for that price, I feel I don't know where that price came from. I feel like it's mainly because of their owner. We remember that owner also pricing. Remember he priced Koulibaly about 100 million as well. Yeah. When we wanted him that season, we got Maguire, and then 2 seasons later he went to Chelsea, and we all remember what happened. I feel like it's always the Napoli manager. Listen, Isak is in my opinion, he's a superior player to Osimhen. And if I'm Arsenal and I want to really go and win the league next season, I'd rather spend that money on Isak. Isak might cost a little bit more because of the English tax, but if I'm Arsenal and I want to be serious about winning that, I'm going for Isak, not for him.
It's an interesting one for me because I have a bit of a theory about Victor Osimhen. How old is he now? I want to say he's like mid to late 20s, right? So he's 25. He's going to turn 26 this season. So he's at a really good age. I'm intrigued to see who does try and buy him. And I say that because, do you remember William Carvalho?
Yeah.
Kevin Strootman. I know they're not strikers, but I bring them up as an example because they, every single year, when they were 20, 23, 25, 26, they were linked to Man United, to Chelsea, to Real Madrid, and nobody ever bought them. Similarly, I've had debates for years about how good Wilfried Zaha was. Now, I never disliked Wilfried Zaha. I just got annoyed at the way people spoke about him like he was one of the best in the world, when I never believed he was. Nobody bought him off Palace after he returned until he left and went Galatasaray. People do it with managers at the moment. The amount of Chelsea fans and the like, I saw saying, bring back Jose. Jose can come back and win us the title again. He's just got a job at Fenerbahce. So I'm not saying these guys are scrubs, but you have to look at who tries to buy individuals sometimes and then where they end up going. And if Osimhen doesn't get picked up this summer, you have to start looking at it and saying, well, what is it that his supporters see, his fans see, that none of the other top clubs and their scouts in Europe are seeing? And there's just something about that for me. I think he's a very good striker. I've watched him play and I like him. So I'm trying to be objective here. Subjectively speaking, I've watched him and thought he was great. Didn't have a good AFCON. I've always liked him. I like the way he plays. I like his physicality. I think he's a good finisher. But then I start to look at it and go, okay, I like him. But why is no one buying him? Why is nobody coming in with that money? It's an interesting one. You know, it becomes a bit like music. One of my favorite singers is a British guy, or British Nigerian guy. Ironically, he's Nigerian, like Osimhen, called Lamar. And Dan will remember some of his songs, things like 50-50 back in the day. He's okay. He sold a few million records. He's a good guy. He's one of my favorites. But objectively speaking, I know he's not one of the best. I know that. Subjectively, he's great. And I think sometimes with football players, you have to do that as well. And I think 25 turning 26, no one comes in for him this summer. There has to be a question as to whether, if you really rate him, maybe on this particular player, on this particular opinion, he's a good player, but he's maybe not elite, even though he did have that title-winning season where he scored 31 goals for Napoli. I sort of feel a little bit like you have to factor that in somewhat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's like Staffy said earlier, you know, us as fans, we don't have all the access to the technology and the scouting departments, all of that, right? So these clubs that do have all of that, what are they seeing or not seeing in Osimhen that hasn't, you know, pushed them to make a big bid over the past couple of seasons? You know, so there has to be question marks over that. And if they're, I just think for the look of it, they're probably seeing is, the price is just too much. It's too much for what he's done of, you know, having one really good season, showing promise. And I think that's off-putting. And I don't think any clubs are going to pay 120 million for him. I can't see it.
Listen, I think Benjamin Sesko is a really good option for Arsenal. £45 million, athletic, strong, very fast. Yes, he's raw, so he's in the finished article right now. But it depends on what else they spend their money on. If they buy experience elsewhere and add Šeško, I think they've improved their squad massively. If they just buy loads of kids again, 20 years old, they may or they may not. It's hard.
But that's the issue, Terry. I'll tell you why. I like Sesko. I've watched some of his play this year. I did some research about him because I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've watched him all season. But I watched some footage about him. I like some of the stuff that I've seen about him. He just turned 21 today, I believe. So he's very young. Here's the thing. He needs to be like a Julian Alvarez type of signing that came in hand with a Haaland. Came in with no pressure. He knew he was going to be the second guy. Obviously, that worked because Haaland was only, at the time, he was only sold for 50 million or 52, whatever it was. So it's not going to be the same as them trying to get an Isak that will cost them over 100 million. So that's much harder to do. Sesko needs to come in hand with a striker that's going to play ahead of him. To me, I look at him as like the way we signed Højlund. We've seen Højlund struggle this season because he didn't have someone to rotate with. He didn't have someone to learn off, and he didn't have someone to take that pressure of being the main number 9 in the team for him. Because how old is Højlund? 21, I swear. So he's about the same age as Sesko. And we've seen that people like me personally come out and say he's not good enough. But you can argue if he was on the bench this season and he was given less minutes, more time to learn off someone else, and he just comes on in the last 15, 20 minutes of a game, or starts the odd game here and there, he would have done better. Because we've seen Højlund do that in the last couple games of the season. He came off the bench twice and scored. I feel like that's what Sesko needs to be. I look at his talent. He does have the talent, but he's not ready to lead the line for a title-winning team, especially in the Premier League. I don't look at Sesko and I'm like, he's the guy who's going to take Arsenal to winning the Premier League next season. Because there's a lot more about his game that he needs to learn. Physically, he needs to improve because he still has like his body. He looks like a teenager still. And there's some elements of the game that needs improvement. He's a little bit slow on the ball. And when I say slow, I don't mean his pace. His reactions are a little bit slower. Because I was looking at him, I'm like, okay, he's not very decisive. He doesn't have that killer instinct as a striker where he just scores right away. He has very good elements of his game, but he needs a coach like Arteta to improve it. But while Arteta improves him in the next 3 years, you need a bagsman in this team. Because Arsenal want to win the league this season, but they don't want to just win one league. They want a striker that's ready to lead the line for at least the next 2-3 years. So they can win a double. They can win it 3 in a row, stuff like that. Or at least compete for it, you know what I'm saying? So he needs to come in hand with an experienced striker, in my opinion.
So, listen, I think that's very logical. The only thing I would challenge it with is I spoke to a few people close to Arsenal back in March, and they said if they carry on scoring goals between now and the end of the season, which they did, they would go for an up-and-coming striker and invest the additional money in more prominent players elsewhere. So I get the claim they need a bagsman, but I can also see it from the other side that they're 2 seasons running broke their goal scoring record in the Premier League. And where this season, I think having an out-and-out bagsman could have helped them is in the Champions League more so than the Premier League, if that makes sense. I feel like the Premier League this year, you could always go back to the games where they didn't win and go, if they've taken a chance here, if they wouldn't have conceded this, they'd be at the top. But essentially, when teams are you're missing out on winning league titles, you're winning them by a point or two, you are the best and second best team. But there's also a little bit of fortune that goes into that. If Liverpool get that penalty that they should have got against Man City, Arsenal may have had all the same results they did and they could have become champions. We can all sort of play that game. You know, we say, oh, this is the game they lost it. Well, what if City didn't win this game if the decision was right or whatever? So it's really hard to play that match. I think it depends on Arsenal's. I think Sesko would be a really good signing, but it depends upon the rest of their window. So say they would have signed Sesko and they got Olise and they got Frankie de Jong or Bruno Guimaraes and they strengthened and they got a decent fullback in as well. Then I would look at them and go, okay, that's a different level team now. There's more creativity. There's more depth. There's an even better midfield. Could that team go one step further and generate more points? Possibly. I almost feel like they don't even need to go one step further in terms of performances and wins. It's just they need to maintain it, and maybe one extra game they've got to win. One extra win last season would have made them Premier League champions. So I think there's a fine line. The other argument I would throw in there is, isn't Kai Havertz that guy? Now, I'm not saying he's a bagsman, but the second half of the season when he settled and kind of got his confidence back, he was good. My feeling is he's going to be like that for the entire season this year. I think he started off slow at Arsenal because his confidence was still in his Chelsea mindset. As soon as he found himself kind of turn of the year and picked up a head of steam, there was a lot of people saying it's a 1 month wonder, then it was a 2 month wonder, and that ended up going right up until the final day of the season where he scored the winning goal in the final game of the campaign. Kai Havertz is someone who I think next year could conceivably score 18 to 25 league goals when you look at his kind of run rate from when he sort of found himself and became settled again. So maybe that's in the train of thought of
I think they'll start Havertz in the 9 anyways.
Yeah, that's my point.
Everything that we're saying is...
Yeah.
I was going to say, sorry to cut you off, but everything that we're talking about in terms of getting an out-and-out strike and all that, that's mainly number one, what Arsenal fans do, or what Arsenal fans want. And secondly, I'm kind of looking at it more when, as you said, when you go to the Champions League and you need that game changer, like we've seen they struggle against Porto and Bayern because they didn't have that standout striker that just had a moment for them. In the league, obviously, they had a lot of goals. I swear that this is the most goals they ever scored in a league campaign. So clearly they're scoring goals there. But my stance remains the same. I think they're going to start with Havertz because a lot of the Arsenal fans last season were saying we need to get a striker. I'm like, Arteta doesn't agree with you. Arteta swears that Havertz is his guy. And it took him time to develop into that role that he wants him to do. It took him time to settle in it. And let's be honest.
Why did he play him in the midfield so many games, though?
He played him in the beginning of the season, though. It was at the beginning of the season. I feel like he tried something, didn't work, and then he moved him to striker.
He put him back there for a few games, though. He did put him back there.
I think he can do. It's funny, man. Right, looking at the stats, right? So just stats and his performances, I think, kind of matched it. He played predominantly attacking midfield, some striker games up until the sort of turn of the year, early February, and he scored 1, 2, 3 league-wise. Looking at 4 goals he scored in the league. Then when he got predominantly moved into the striker role from sort of the middle of February onwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 goals in the last sort of 11, 12 games of the season. Plus there was assists in there as well. I've just got a feeling, just a gut feeling, that the Kai Havertz of Bayer Leverkusen has sort of refound himself. The atmosphere at Chelsea, at Arsenal is good. They're behind the manager, even though they didn't win the league or a trophy last year. I just get the feeling they're going to turn up to training in pre-season, and there's going to be a really good mood about the place. And I think Kai Havertz can grow on what he did last year. He scored 13 league goals. I don't think it's a crazy. People always say you need a 20-goal a season striker. Is it inconceivable that he scores 7 more league goals next year? Well, if he starts the season with confidence, I don't think it's inconceivable.
Yeah. I don't think it's crazy what you're saying. I understand everything you've said for your justifications are correct. However, I still think there are question marks over his consistency season to season for Havertz. I still think there's an element of risk, even though, like you said, he ended the season strong. And realistically, you think, maybe one of the reasons why now full season he can't just carry that on. But unfortunately, we haven't seen that from Havertz, in his career. You can argue, okay, Chelsea tax, still got Champions League there. So it's up to them. If Arteta really believes that and really trusts him, then go for it. But it doesn't seem like a large portion of the Arsenal fans share that trust because they're wanting, everyone I've spoke to, do you want him to be your first choice striker next season? No, we need to sign a new first choice striker. So, but he can prove me wrong.
I hear you. No, I do hear you. I just think you look at the money Kai Havertz is on, the fact that he started or played in 37 league games last year. They might go for Victor Osimhen, but even if they sign Osimhen, maybe he starts, but I still think Kai Havertz is going to start a lot of games next year. But Arsenal fans, let us know.